Welcome back to Saruwatari Xtreme. Today I am back on the endless quest of the 7, trying to get this started, but we'll see how that goes. In the midst of scrambling to try to get it started last time, I had skipped over some footage that has some pretty good information about the fuel system when I went to close everything up. So let's take a real quick look at that before we move forward. A big thanks goes out to Abel for always taking care of me. And as you could see, luckily in his mini projects, he was able to send me a new fuel pump hanger, which actually brought a lot of questions from you guys. So let's just go over a couple of things really quick. As far as the fuel pump hanger, which pretty much covers all cars that are configured similarly, I would typically just modify the pump. Now, the pump is always a big question. It is true in the 7 I run a Weldon because I believe my strategy was to go to methanol, and to deliver the volume I needed, that's the pump I needed. But for a long time, I can't believe I'm going to say this because I know Ara will be just dancing in the streets or doing wheelies on his bike, but what I used to run was a 2JZ pump. And with just a small modification on the bottom of the hanger, I was able to use that, and I ran that for a long time. I don't remember exactly how much power I made with it, but it worked great and it was insanely reliable. And the truth be told, this is actually the pump I run in a lot of my modified cars. The supercharged NSX, anything that I come across where it's possible. Everyone has a different theory, okay? So I'm going to tell you mine, and it really does not matter to me what you do. Just do what works best for you. Whenever possible, I'll use an OE pump, like the 2JZ pump, because I always find them more reliable. Now, there's phenomenal race pumps out there, and they put out tons of volume. Some things to consider are, one, is it going to be overkill for your car, your project? If you're looking long-term and you're really not going to be making incredible amounts of power, my theory always is that an OE pump definitely most likely has more R&D in it and is designed for longevity over a race-type pump. So if it was me, I would always go with an OE, and the 2JZ usually fits in almost all the Japanese cars I work on, so it's phenomenal, provides plenty of volume. I haven't had any issues. So an example too, you can kind of use it to fix other things that are put together that I don't really like a lot. Like the NSX uses what's called somewhat similar to like a booster pump, which originally I saw that and Kenny Bell designed it. Honestly, what it is, it's basically just amping up the amperage and the voltage to the pump to spin it harder when you're under boost. But to me, that's kind of not the best way to do it. I mean, if you could run just a regular 12-volt source like the 2JZ pump, provides enough volume, and use either your 1-to-1 fuel pressure regulator or a FMU or multiplier, I think the NSX might be 1 pound of boost is 5 pounds of fuel pressure. That again too isn't the greatest way. I prefer 1-to-1, but since that car was set up that way, I just ran it. I mean, if I ever wanted to make big power on it, I would definitely need to change the injectors. I would want to change the fuel system around. So that's something for you guys to consider when you're doing your projects that I've learned along the way. The other thing that Abel was talking to me about is like, well, why don't I just get you a more expensive billet one? Well, that's, of course, that is Abel's theme. More money, better. But honestly, for me, because I exit out the bottom of the cell, I'm just using this for a return. And the piping right here was plenty to use the 2JZ pump. But I've seen a lot of people modify the plumbing. That is one thing you want to always remember, that if you're modifying your fuel system to accommodate the horsepower, you're only as good as the smallest restriction. So obviously that is fairly small, so you would definitely want to increase volume. You'd want to talk to Abel about that since he's up on the cutting edge stuff, and that is not really my deal. So now what we're ready to do is just go ahead and modify this piece that Abel was nice enough to give me. We'll put it back in so the return line will be all good, set everything else up. One thing I definitely wanted you to see though is that I never really showed a picture of the fuel cell after I'd used the diesel to clean the interior of the cell, and that really is a nice thing to see. So we'll take a look at that real quick right now. So what I did was I used diesel to clean the cell. Let's take a quick before and after look at what's going on here. So you can see how it looked before, and now you can see how it looks after cleaning the cell with the diesel. Now, all I have to do is modify the hanger to put that back in for the return, install everything, and put it back together. That really is pretty straightforward. You saw me take it all apart. But I will mention this. If you have the ability to filter before the pump after anything's been taken apart, it's a great idea. It is definitely difficult if your pump is in tank, but since the Weldon is external and it's fairly pricey, for me what I'll do is I'll put an inline filter before the pump. If you have that ability, it's great, because we all know as much as we wash and clean everything, it's hard to get everything 100%. And this way, it will definitely save your pump life. I hope that information on the fuel system will possibly translate into helping you in all of your adventures. With that behind us, now let's move back to where we were as far as going through the process to try and get everything resolved on the crib. We'll take a look at that right now. The first thing I want to do is test the continuity on the leads between the ref and sync and the M4. So again, for those of you that don't know, this is a scope. And if you're going to do a lot of electronic work, sensor work, custom harnesses, they're almost a must. I mean, you could really get by with a voltmeter if you're just doing minor stuff, but anything major, it's well worth the investment. And there are so many different types. Technology always changes. I mean, they have recorders. They're just different, many different options that, of course, they're happy to charge you more for. I would research it and possibly think about investing in one if you want to get serious. But for our specific case here, what I'm trying to figure out is I just want to make sure that the leads are okay. My assumption is that they are, but best case, always keep everything as a possibility until you find the problem. There have been many cases where I thought I found it out and it comes full circle and I missed it. So we just kind of go through the process and see. So for those of you that haven't done it before, you'll hear people say ringing out a wire, checking for continuity. That's what we're doing. We're just trying to make sure that the leads are intact so the signal's clean. The signal looked clean on the timing light, but of course we didn't see it here at the M4. So we'll check. We put the unit down. This lead is connected to one of the wires, of course, out there on the sensor. Then what we'll do is I matched it up on the wiring harness, of course, in the diagram. Then we'll take this probe right here and put it into the M4 harness. Now, these probes are amazing. They came from Snap-on, and they allow you to probe the backside either when it's a very small opening, or if you have a weather pack or what they call DTM, they allow you to work past the plug. So you don't have to disconnect everything, and you can read real time if you want to read the voltage. Now, a secret, I'm sure that these costed a pretty penny coming from Snap-on. A paper clip also works very well and is much more cost effective. So for some of those that you would like to save some, I just want to throw that out there. Now, getting back to our problem, we know that that's hooked up there. I'm going to go ahead and hook into the lead that is right here to see what happens. Okay. I'm going to work it a little bit. Okay. Now that tone, that audible tone, is why some people say ringing it out. We know that the lead has continuity, and what I'm going to do now just to make sure is those pickups oftentimes run a ground shield. That's to eliminate the noise that we were talking about. So I just want to make sure that nothing happened to the insulation. And what I'll do is I'll go back to the same lead, okay, and I'll put it in there. It's in position, and I'm going to go ahead and change the setting now. There we go. Okay, everything's set there. I need to disconnect the other lead that was coming from the sensor there, and then I will connect this to ground on the plate that runs all the engine management. We're running an isolated ground there to the igniter. So what I'll do now is put the probe in, and we do not want to hear tone. And we're good. So I don't have what I would consider short, like the wire grounding to the shield, but I need to run through all these. But what I did do is I ran through the other three before. That way I had practice, so this would go much smoother for you guys to see. So at this point I could say we could push this aside and move on to the next step to see if we can figure out what's going on. So for those of you that don't really use or have experience with standalone computers, this is what the M4 runs. It runs in DOS. I actually like it more because it's fast. It's a lot faster than running in Windows. It's fairly simple. The new computers are much more technologically advanced. For me, a lot of times that's not as great because it just does a whole lot more things. And to me, sometimes that's more things that can cause problems. Now, on a regular street car, Abel loves the Adaptronic. Best way to go. I agree on a street car. All the safeties are great. On a race car, like the 7 or the NSX, I run as few safeties as possible. Now, that might seem insane because it could possibly sacrifice an engine, but That actually probably only happened a handful of times in all of my career. But I've been hindered tons of times on the dyno and at the track by safeties that just for some reason are in there, and I hit it, we don't see it possibly on the dyno, and it just happens at the track, all sorts of weird things. So we try and keep it as simple as possible. At least that's my own theory. Everybody has their own theory. If you like all the safeties and want to take the risk, well, of course, that's the way you should do it. But just for those of you that haven't seen anything like this, just to get a quick idea, everything is kind of the same. And when I say that, I mean that the new ones are much more advanced. You might get more resolution, meaning more cells to adjust, and more safeties, more features. But you got to remember, the bottom line is what you're really controlling is ignition and fuel. So like in this, you could see where you enter the fuel system, and there's tons of different adjustments, but I don't want to take a ton of time on that type of stuff, because when you go to a company like Motec, they're going to set all that up for you, and they're going to advise you as to what they think is the best, and then you can explain them your situation if you want to alter that. And that's something that should be worked out between you and them. But if you just look at the main table here, you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. So, you obviously have your RPM here, your efficiency here, which is your manifold pressure, and these cells are all your numbers. So how did I do what I did? I actually had to remove all these numbers and write them down, take pictures to make sure I had everything logged correctly. Then I had to build an entire new file and enter all these numbers and all the adjustments. So not only do you have the fuel, okay, you also have the ignition. And of course you could see, you have your RPM, your manifold pressure, your load, and it's a lot of work. Now, you can also adjust for more resolution, and that's what I was saying. A lot of the new systems probably have even more resolution, but the bottom line is that's what you're really looking for. All the other adjustments and everything, they're not as in-depth as this, but everything was transposed. So the way I got around it is that I believe that the file was corrupt, that for some reason something wasn't working right. I don't know why. It could have been a number of things. But remember too, that one factor is it's been sitting a long time. But I have seen it actually happen even when I was campaigning. That's kind of why I had in the back of my mind that was very possible. Took everything out, saved this file, set it aside, brought up a new file, put all the numbers back in, saved it again, then removed everything out of the M4, so it had basically no base settings, put this entire new calibration in. Now that we've checked the continuity between the ref and sync sensors and the M4, and we moved over and rebuilt the entire calibration in the laptop for the M4, we're reloaded, we'll take our timing light and keep our fingers crossed. We'll check again to see if we can get the crip to zero out according to what the M4 thinks. Okay, go ahead and hit it. Okay, good. Well, my friends, every now and then you hope that you get lucky. And in this instance, this really paid off. And boy, am I happy that I don't have to go any further. It just goes to show that every now and then, things work out the way you want, but it is rare with either of these two cars. So we know that now the crip is set back to zero. The M4 is reading everything correctly. Of course, I'm sure you guys all know the next step is, let's see if we can get the light off. Okay, Dad, go ahead and hit it. Well, guys and gals, all I can say is yes. That's about as much as you're going to get at me right now because I'm extremely exhausted. Thank you, Dad, for helping me. And of course, the 7 is back up and running. You've all seen it and been witness to it. And thank all of you for watching. Now, I need to double check everything from top to bottom, make sure we don't have any leaks all the fluid levels. I like to rev on a little bit, but of course I need to check everything before I do that. And of course, I'm sure all of you will comment that the idle sounds wretched. Well, of course I'm running fouled out plugs because I don't want to ruin a new set of plugs, but I can probably get by that just by turning the idle up, just to give it a few revs if possible for all of you, and then we can call it a day. So I will be right back. As I go around and check everything, there's something I wanted to throw out there that could possibly help some of you. Okay, so granted, this is an M4 and everything is much newer now, but the same principles apply. You can see all the sensors and everything are listed out here. When you're doing your final checks on your car, always look for diagnostic errors. It is the fastest and quickest way to save you trouble. When you talk to someone like Abel, the #1 problem he has with customers bringing their cars in is that they're not wired properly or they're not set up to go. And he wastes tons of time and he has to charge the customer. So it'll save you massive amounts of money. You'll get a diagnostic error and it'll actually tell you what sensor might have the issue. That'll either tell you need to replace that sensor because it's not functioning properly, or something could have gone wrong in the wiring. But just want to throw that out to you because it could probably help you in some way, shape, or form. Well, all right then. What a phenomenal day and a relief to me. The 7 is up and running. We're able to hear it run, get some nice revs on it. Now, of course, seemingly everything would be fine, but I have to check a lot more stuff. And let's not forget that I'm still in a very tight spot for this. As all of you will remember, the Motec dash, which pretty much controls everything outside of the M4, is not functioning because it has the calibration from the NSX. But my good friend Alex, who is a computer wizard, is working on it right now, and he is trying to extract the data out of the hard drive of my laptop and either replace the hard drive in that Sony or get me another laptop and load it onto that laptop with the serial port. But unfortunately, it has to run on DOS, and a simulator does not work. So he has his work cut out for him, but I have my fingers crossed he's going to come through for me and all of you at the same time. So if we can get that dialed, that would allow me to get everything going and obviously bring it up on a higher rev and rev on it a lot harder. Now, I know a lot of you noticed that there was a substantial amount of smoke. If memory serves me correctly, anytime we'd fire the 7, we would have smoke. But luckily, the rotary god helped me through that process. So he had me actually find the Redline 2-stroke racing oil, which amazingly we still had some from before and it still looked fine, so I went ahead and used it. Now, for those of you that are just getting into rotaries, the 7 came with an oil metering pump, so we ran the metering pump even when we were running a single turbo. So all the people that say don't run synthetic oil, I never really had an issue with it. But what I did do was I added 2-stroke oil to supplement. And that would be a question better asked to the rotary god because I don't remember. Obviously, you wouldn't want to run as much if you're running the metering pump. But the magic number for us today was 1 ounce of 2-stroke racing oil to 1 gallon of fuel. And then if we were actually going to race, 1/2 ounce of 2-stroke racing oil to a gallon of fuel. So we saw a lot of smoke come out, but you'll remember too that to lubricate the combustion chambers and all the seals, I sprayed a ton of Triflow in there, and we really didn't run it enough to get everything cleared out. Mostly because I can't run it very long because without the dash controlling the cooling system and everything, I don't want to take a chance of forgetting that we might have an issue and grenading something because of that. But Abel helped me out, and judging by the color of the smoke, he actually helped me and we checked the oil control ring, so everything is solid there. Feeling pretty good. but very tired. Been thrashing on the 7, trying to get this all hammered out because just getting quite exhausted in the whole process. But at least now I have that relief going for me. So for me, it's time for me to take a break. I think I'll do something fun, like take out one of my supercars, leave Drew behind so I don't have to live with all of her criticisms, not work on the equivalent of a supermodel, which is right here, so finicky and temperamental. On that high note, I hope all of you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.